In this video, I'm going to be ranking every single creature in Ark Survival Evolved and Ark Survival Ascended on a tier list. Also, keep in mind I'm a PvE player, so this list is sorted towards PvE and not PvP, but anyway, let's get into it. First off, we have the Ankylosaurus, which I'm going to be putting in the B tier. This one's obviously great. It gets a metal, which is one of the most useful resources in the game, and it can harvest a ton of it with a weight reduction, so it's going to be pretty high. And then we have the Arenio, which I'm going to put at the D tier. It's a big giant spider. This one's annoying to tame because it's a passive tame, even though it's really aggressive, so you got to use like bugs repellent, and honestly it's not that useful, so it's going to be in D tier. And then we have the Archaeopteryx, which is going to be in C tier. You can basically glide with this thing, but it's like a shoulder pet where you hold it, except for you can't use stuff like shoulder pets can. So you basically can only glide around with this, which it has very specific use cases, which is why I'm going to put it at C, because I don't really find myself using it very often. And then we have the Berry, or the Baryonyx. This one's going to go in the A tier. This one's a great theropod. It's very agile, can fit in a lot of caves, and it can swim. It doesn't have an oxygen stat, so you don't need to breathe underwater, and it's a really good swimmer, so you can use it underwater and on land. And underwater, it has a little tail spin that can stun stuff as well. Next, we have the Dillo, very early game tame, and it's going to go in D tier, because even early game, I don't find it that useful. You can't ride it or anything. You can just like whistle it to attack stuff. That's pretty much it. And then we have the Dunkleosteus. This one's going to be B tier, kind of close to A. It gathers a ton of resources, and it has a weight reduction on a lot of them, like metal and oil, and crystal, and all that kind of stuff. But of course, it is underwater, and not much of that stuff is underwater, but it is pretty useful. It can also get a ton of stone as well, which is what you'd also want to use it for, is getting those underwater rocks. Then we have the Doedicurus, which is going to go in A tier. This is like the best creature for getting stone, or one of the best creatures, because it can gather a ton of it, and it has a weight reduction on it, which makes it really easy to get a bunch of stone and sand as well. And then we have the Compy, which is going to go in the D tier. This one's a shoulder pet, but not a shoulder pet I would pick, mainly because there's just so many better other options out there, and this one isn't the best one to tame. And also you need prime meat, so you can't even really tame it early game. And then we have the Daedon, which is going to go in the A tier. This one has an amazing ability where it can heal dinos around it, which is obviously super useful. You can use it to heal your wounded dinos, or you can use it in boss fights to heal your dinos as they're fighting, so a lot of utility with this one. And then we have the Diplodocus, or as Allier would say, the Diplodocus. Anyway, this one's in C tier. It's not really that great. Basically, it has a 10-seater saddle, which is a pretty unique ability, but I've never used it. I don't know if anyone's ever used it, even though I do think it's quite a unique ability. It can run pretty fast, but it doesn't do any damage at all, so this one's very close to D, but it's going to be in C tier just because of how unique the ability of 10-seater saddle is. And then we have the Moth. This one's going to go in the C tier. People use this one for getting wyvern eggs, which is a reason you could bump it higher, but I don't really use it for getting wyvern eggs that much. And it's kind of just a really bad flyer compared to all the other ones because it has low stamina and weight, so it's going to be in the C tier, even though flyers are useful for getting some places, so that's why it's staying in C and not any lower. Next we have the Mantis, which is going to go straight to the A tier. This one is a great tame. It's pretty good at attacking stuff, fighting. You can basically put stuff in its hands, like swords, pickaxes, and you can like harvest resources. You can also put clubs in its hand and knock stuff out. And you could put like gloves and stuff in its hands to give it armor as well. So this one's got a lot of versatility with gathering and attacking. And then we have the RG, which is going to easily be in the S tier. This thing is extremely useful. It's like one of the best flyers in the game because it has so much weight and it can carry pretty much anything because of its weight reduction, as well as it has a smithy in its saddle and it can pick up pretty decently sized creatures, and it's just an amazing utility creature. And then we have the Beelzebufo, or the giant frog. This one's going to go in the B tier, mainly because of its one ability, which is basically when it kills stuff like Meganera and stuff, it gives it chitin, or cementing paste, so you get a ton of cementing paste with this thing, but that's about the only use I have for it. And then we have the Deinonychus, which is going to be in the A tier. This one is a great creature as well. Not only is it pretty easy to get, you just have to seal the eggs of these things, but once you do get them, you can basically kill a bunch of stuff because it has a bleed attack, as well as it can latch onto large creatures, and you can use them in boss fights, and they do bleed attacks to bosses, which is like the only creature to do that, so that is a great function of it, and that's why it's in the A tier. Then we have the Arthroplora, which is going to be in the D tier. This one is not really useful at all. Like I've said, I'm a PvE player, so having the Arthro and all of its abilities seem more oriented towards PvP, which I don't need. Also, this one is kind of annoying to tame because it's passive and in caves, so it's going to be in the D tier. And then we have the Anglerfish, which is a pretty useful ability, which is basically you can get silica pearls. You can harvest them really efficiently, get a ton of them, which of course silica pearls are used in a lot of fabricated stuff and stuff in the later game, so being able to get that resource efficiently is very useful. And then we have the Basilo, which is going to be at the A tier. This is probably the best underwater creature, mainly because of the abilities it has. Basically, it can't be stung by jellyfish or eels, which jellyfish can dismount you, and eels are just really annoying because they stun you a bunch. As well as you can basically go to the surface and then be able to regenerate extremely quickly, and they also give you insulation as well. After that, we have the Carno, which is going to go in the B tier. This is one of the creatures in Ark that's in desperate need of a TLC. Maybe we'll get one in the future, but this one is kind of strong. It's pretty good in the kind of like mid-game, because it also has a bleed attack, which they added a few years ago, which definitely made it more useful and worthy of being in the B tier. Then we have the Calicatherium. This one is tamed with beer, which makes it to where I'm not really going to go out of my way to make beer in order to tame this thing, because it doesn't really have any crazy uses in PvE anyway. And then we have the Dinopithecus in the Lost Island, one of the creature votes. This one's a pretty cool one, I definitely like it, but it's going to be in B tier. Basically, it is a really good travel mount. It's extremely fast, it can jump really high, climb walls, and it does some pretty decent damage, so it's a pretty great mid-game creature, I would say. Next creature we have is the Managarmr, which I'm going to be putting in the S tier. The last DLC creature tier list I made, I put this one in A tier, and I got a lot of comments saying that I should have put it in S, and I actually do agree with you guys. I think I should have put it a little bit higher. So I'm making it right in this tier list by putting it in S. It is extremely fast, can jump extremely high, as well as it has an ice breath that can freeze stuff instantly and kill them as well. It's a great creature, great for travel mount and PvE use. Obviously it is extremely overpowered in PvP, which is why they nerfed it so much, which did definitely bring it down, but I still think it's S tier worthy. And then we have the Carcanos, which I'm going to put in the A tier. This is the giant crab of Aberration. And this one is pretty great. It can jump extremely high, it's really strong, as well as you can hold 2 creatures with it, and you can like chuck them out as well and throw them, so this one is definitely a solid creature. And then we have the Dire Bear, which is going to go in the A tier. This one is a really hard-hitting creature, it does a lot of damage. It can also like basically ramp up speed over time. It gives you insulation, which is pretty cool, but it also gathers honey from beehives and gives you extra honey, which is super useful. And then we have the Gigantopithecus, which is going to go in C tier. Not the most useful creature, even though this thing is a cool concept. It can throw you and you can ride zip lines with it, but it's not insanely useful, so it's C tier. And then we have the Achatina, or the snail. This one's going to go in C tier. You can basically get cementing paste passively with this guy because it poops it out, but I just think there's a lot more effective and fast ways to get cementing paste, and you have to use sweet veggie cakes to tame this thing and keep it alive, so C tier. And then we have the Hesperornis, which is going to go in the D tier. I know this thing can get golden eggs, but I personally never use it, and it's kind of annoying to tame, so I'm just going to keep it at the D tier. Next we have the Iguanodon. This one is definitely an underrated one. It is an amazing starter tame. Basically it has infinite stamina when you run on 4 legs, so you can just run infinitely, which is great and can make it a great travel mount, as well as it's actually pretty strong and has a bonus ability where it can convert berries into seeds. And then we have the Bronto, which I'm going to put in A tier. Even though I think this one is also in desperate need of a TLC, it is still pretty useful because it has a massive platform saddle, as well as I think it's one of the best berry gatherers in the game. It has a huge area of effect where you can get tons of berries, which easily makes it the best for getting berries in my opinion, as well as it has a huge amount of weight. So all of those are going to be making it A tier. Then we have the Direwolf, which I'm going to be putting in the B tier. Kind of close to A, honestly, but this one is a pretty strong. You can get a pack of it, and you can use it for caving as well. It can also sniff out Purlovias and Explore Notes, which is pretty cool. And then we have the Allosaurus, which is going to be in the A tier. This one's a pretty solid all-around carnivore. Basically, it gets a pack bonus from having multiple of them around, which makes it stronger, as well as it has a bleed effect, so you can bleed out large creatures, but it doesn't have really a good health or damage compared to larger theropods, which is why it's just going to be in the A tier. Then we have the Giant Turtle. This one is not the most useful one, so it's just going to be in C tier. I guess it can grab their berries, and it's a pretty decent tank. But then we have the Giga, which is going to be another creature that's going to be in the S tier. Might be a little bit high, but I don't think it is, because this thing is insanely strong. It is an absolute killing machine. You can use it to pretty much kill everything, and nothing can stop you, as well as it has a ton of health as well. This one is an amazing creature. Next we have the Tropeognathus, which is going to be at A tier. It does kind of suck that it is a reskinned Terrajapa, but it does have an amazing ability where you could put a jetpack saddle on it and boost yourself at insane speeds, as well as it has a turret on the front of it that shoots grenades, so this one's pretty dope. And in the A tier, it is insanely fast, which is another really good purpose of it, obviously because of the jetpack saddle. And then at C tier, we have the Enforcer. This one is a decent one on Extinction. I never really find myself making it that much, which is why it's in C tier. But it is pretty cool. You can like climb on walls and teleport and go pretty fast. Honestly, might be a bit low, but honestly, I don't find myself making it that much. It also has to run on like element dust as well. And then we have the giant bee, which is going to be in C tier. You can get basically honey with it, but it is kind of annoying to tame, and I'd rather just get a dire bear and harvest the honey that way, so that's why I have it at C tier instead of higher. Next we have the Equus, which I'm going to put at A tier. This one is a great starter tame. It's great for travels, it's pretty decently fast, it has a weight reduction on a lot of resources, it has a mortar and pestle saddle, and it also has the lasso, which you can use to move unconscious creatures, so you can actually save them if they like knock out in the water and start drowning. Next up we have the Noglin, which this one might be controversial. I'm going to put it at the D tier, mainly because like I said, I'm a PvE player, and in PvE this thing is extremely hard to tame and doesn't really have any uses that I would need, because I don't need to mind and control other people's creatures because there are no other people's creatures, so I'm just gonna put that one in the D. And then we have the Vulture, which is also probably gonna be a bad one. I'm gonna put it in the D as well. Once again, I don't really need these things, like flocks of them, to go attack other players, and also I feel like there's a lot better alternative shoulder pets I could use, especially the map this is originally on, Scorched Earth. There's a better shoulder pet that you'd want over this one, which of course we'll get into later, so it's just gonna be in the D tier for me. And then we have the Morellatops, which is going to be in the A tier. This is a great starter tame. It can hold water in it, which is obviously great, especially for Scorched Earth. It's actually pretty fast, and has a pretty decent weight and stamina as well, and can defend itself. And then we have the Ravager, which is also going to be in the A tier. This is the perfect starting mount for Aberration, and on other maps you can get it, it's really good. It's really fast, it's got good weight. I believe it has weight reductions and stuff, as well as you can go on zip lines and slide down them, so the traversal abilities of this thing is amazing, as well as it's pretty strong as well. And then we have the Fedora Hawk. This one's going to be in the A tier. Basically, it can just get your stuff for you and bring it back to you. So if you die, it can just bring your dead body bag back to you, which is obviously amazing. And then we have the Diplocaulus. This one's going to be in the B tier. It basically gives you oxygen so you can breathe, and then it actually is pretty fast, but it basically dismounts you when you go on land, and it's really, really weak. So if you get attacked by anything, it'll probably kill you, but at the same time, you can outrun pretty much anything in the water. This one's pretty decent, but it's going to be a B tier. I don't really find it as useful, though. I never really use it, but it is pretty cool. And then we have the Giant Beaver, which is going to be in the A tier. This thing gets a ton of wood and has a weight reduction on it, so it's pretty much a go-to creature for getting wood harvest. Obviously, there's a lot of alternatives, but I think this one is a great option, as well as it has a smithy on its saddle. And then we have the Oasis Tower, which is going to be in the A tier. This one just has a ton of crazy abilities. Basically, it can fly around, you can build a base on the back of it. It naturally gives resources to you. It like automatically fertilizes crops plots you put on the back of it, and it can bring dinosaurs back to life, which is all pretty crazy, but it's really annoying to feed, so you basically have to like feed it pots to keep it alive, which can be quite annoying. And it's not like one of those main S tier creatures, even though it does have a lot of really cool abilities. Next up we have the Rock Elemental, the Rock Golem. I'm going to put this one in B tier. It's not an A because I don't really find it as useful as some of the other creatures in A tier, especially for PvE, because it is kind of annoying to tame and it's more suited towards PvP, but it's still pretty cool. It's really strong, has a great resistance, and you can use it to kill wyverns and stuff, which I've never really used it for, but I know people do use it for that, which is a pretty good use. Then we have the Velonosaur, which is going to be in the A tier. The Velonosaur is a really strong creature, and it can like basically shoot like a turret, which is pretty dope, having a dinosaur that can shoot things out of its face. And it's actually pretty powerful as well, so you can use it for like orbital supply drops and Extinction on the early game, as well as just killing a bunch of stuff on the early game and Extinction, so it's pretty good. Next we have the Magmasaur, which is going to be in the S tier. This one gets insane amounts of metal, and it's probably the best metal gatherer in the entire game, which is why I'm going to need to put it in S tier, as well as it's pretty strong overall and has some really cool abilities, being able to like shoot magma and stuff. Then we have the Thorny Dragon, which I'm going to put at the B tier. This one is pretty much essential on Scorched Earth for getting wood, even though once you get the chainsaw it becomes pretty much obsolete. It can do some decent damage and can do like its like spike thing with its tail. It's pretty decent, and you can get wood, which is good, but it doesn't really get that much, so it's going to be in the B tier. And then we have the Ichthyornis. This one is horrid. I'm going to put it in F tier. It just annoys me so much because every time I try to do anything, they're always coming and stealing my stuff and taking the stuff I'm holding and throwing it on the ground. It's just really annoying, and I don't even care if they're a good tame. It's going to be F tier. And then we have the Astrocetus, or the Space Dolphin. This one's going to be in the B tier. I imagine this would be more useful in PvP, but on PvE, it's not really the most useful thing. It is a really cool creature, don't get me wrong, and the hyperspeed thing is absolutely dope, but it is really annoying to tame, and you need a tech saddle for it, so it's really late game, and by that point I don't really need it. And then we have the Bulldog. I'm going to put all of these shoulder light pets in the B tier, mainly because they are essential on Aberration, and you do need them to survive on that map. But on every other map, you don't really need them as much, and there's a lot better alternative shoulder pets that I would use on other maps, but on Aberration, they're good, so it's just going to be B tier, I think is a good spot. And then we have the Dimetrodon, which I'm going to put at the C tier. This thing is like a mobile AC unit, so you can basically put eggs and hatch them, which is pretty cool. And you could use this like early game if you don't have access to an AC, but other than that, it's a very specific use case, so it's going to be in C. Then we have the Eel, or the Electroforest. This one's going to be at D tier. It's really annoying to tame because they're passive tames, even though they're extremely highly aggressive, which is kind of annoying, and for all that, you can't even ride it or do anything really with it, so it's going to be pretty low. Next we have the Dung Beetle, which I'm going to put at the B tier. This one got quite an upgrade in Arc Ascended, as you can basically pick up poop with it, but it can also make fertilizer as well, so it's mainly used for like fertilizer type stuff if you're going crops, so it's pretty decent and at B tier. Then we have the Gallimimus, which I'm going to put at the C tier. This one runs really fast and has a 3-seater saddle, but honestly there's not really a spot where I've ever thought that I needed the Gallimimus, even though I do think having a fast 3-seater mount is kind of cool. Then we have the Maywing, which I'm going to put at the S tier. This is like the best travel mount in the entire game. It literally is a gliding creature, but it like glides at Mach 10, so you can travel across the entire map and extremely fast, as well as it has like imprinting modes as well, with like the milk squirting out of it. It's really weird, but yeah, it does that as well, which is an interesting ability of it, but it's definitely S tier. And then we have the Andrewsarchus. This is a great early game tame and a great late game tame, because early game you can ride it without a saddle and it does pretty decent damage. It isn't the hardest creature to tame, and then you can also make the like turret gun saddle and mow stuff down with the bullets, which makes it a good late game tame, and in caves as well if you order. Next I have the Phoenix, which I'm going to put at C tier. I wish I could put this one higher, as it is just a really cool creature overall, but honestly it's not that useful. It's basically a super late game tame because it's extremely hard to find. It only spawns during heat waves, and usually by the time I'd get it I already have wyverns and stuff, which are way better in pretty much every aspect, but it does poop out silica pearls, which is cool I guess. Next we have the Lamprey, which is not really useful at all. I believe you can tame these with fish baskets. It does have one use though, and if it's leeched onto you, you can actually go in the radiation zone, but I feel like it'd be a lot easier just to make a hazard suit than go through the entire mess of getting a Lamprey. Next is the Jerboa, which is going in the B tier. Very similar reasoning for the like shoulder pets on Aberration, as it's essential on Scorched Earth because it tells you about storms, but on other maps it doesn't really have that same function, even though I think the light pets are a little bit more useful, but I still think B is a good spot. Then we have the Roll Rat, which is also going in B. Another creature that's essential on Aberration because it's the only way to get wood on that map, at least efficiently anyway. But yeah, other maps there's way better things that can gather wood, so B tier is a good spot. And then we have the Dimorphodon, which is also going in the B tier. It's a pretty good shoulder pet and pretty strong overall, but I believe there's a lot of other better shoulder pet picks, so I'm going to keep it at B. Next I have the Desmodus. This was another creature that won the votes, and this is one of the best of them. This one is absolutely great, obviously because I put it in S tier. It's an amazing, really fast flyer that can dive and go extremely fast, but it can also make these sanguine elixirs, which basically make it to where when you eat it near something, it gives it like 30% taming effectiveness or something, or not, just taming like percentage, which is absolutely amazing. And then we had the Plesiosaur, which I'm actually going to put in A tier, even though I do think this one also needs a TLC as well. I feel like it gets hated on a bit too much because it's actually really fast and pretty strong, even though it's hard to hit with, and I do like using it underwater, so I'm going to put it at A tier. Next I have the Amargasaurus, which I'm actually going to put at C tier. Even though I think this is a really cool looking creature, it's more PvP oriented with all like the spikes and stuff, and I don't really have much use for that in PvE, especially for how much like trouble I had to go through for taming these things, because these things are notoriously extremely hard to tame. And then we have the Hyenodon, which I'm going to put at the C tier. This one is not the greatest creature. It's kind of annoying to tame. You basically like go and pet it, but it can like reset really easily, but it has a meat pack that you can put on it, and it like preserves meat, but it doesn't really have too much function. Next is the Ichthyosaurus, which I'm going to put at B. It's a really solid underwater creature. It doesn't really do much damage, but it is really fast and can get you around in the early game and the underwater stages of the early game, which I think is a really good function of it. Just being able to get around super quickly is really useful, so it's going to be a B. And then I have the Ferox, which I'm actually going to put at C. I don't think this one's really useful for PvE at all, because it's really annoying to tame, and every time I want to use it in its actual good form, I have to feed it Element, which of course Element is kind of annoying to get. Some maps it's easier than others, but for all that, a creature that is not really the greatest or strongest, when I could use something that would be way easier to get, like a Rex or something, and I don't have to feed that Element every time. Next on the list is the Griffin. This one is an absolutely amazing flyer, and definitely one of my favorites, which is why it's going to be in the S tier. It has pretty decent stats overall. I mean, it's got pretty good weight, so you can basically use it as a utility dino, as well as it main the function as the first creature to ever be able to dive, which is another thing that's come in many creatures since then, but is the first one to be able to do it, and it's still a really cool ability, being able to go extremely fast, as well as with the dive, you can do insane amounts of damage if you know how to do it right. And then I have the Dodo, which is going to go in the C tier. Very iconic and kind of funny, and considered putting it in S tier for meme purposes, but it's you can use it for like eggs, I guess. I don't know. It's not the greatest, but it's a Dodo, so yeah. And then I have the Reaper, which is going to go in S tier. This is just one of the coolest creatures in the entire game. And it's got some really cool abilities. First off, it's really strong. It can also do like a tailspin attack, as well as it can shoot poison balls. But it can also jump extremely high, which is something that most creatures like theropods like this anyway, if you can even call it a theropod, is something they don't really have, which is really great, because it's also good at mobile, as well as being able to kill stuff. And then we have the Mammoth, which is going to be in the A tier. This is amazing, and ever since the TLC, it's been even more amazing. Can gather wood, thatch, it gathers tons of berries now. It's one of the best berry gatherers. It's got that drum saddle as well, which is pretty cool. You can basically play it and give out a buff, which I think is also more useful for PvP, but this great thing is a great like harvesting creature, as well as all the new abilities are insane. Next is the Caprosuchus, which is going to go in the C tier. This one is pretty decent. I mean, I don't know, it doesn't really have many crazy uses or reasons I would get it, but I guess, you know, it can do some decent damage, and it has the pounce ability. Then we have the Kairuku, which is also going to go in the C tier. Mainly use these guys for just beating them for polymer with clubs, which is pretty horrible to say, but that's pretty much all I use them for, which isn't a use on the tame. It can basically give you insulation, a little bit of it, which is cool, but they're also just kind of nice to have around the base, I guess. And then there's the Gigaraptor, one of the newer creatures in Arc Ascended, and this one's got insane uses, which is why it's going to be an A tier. It's basically used for like imprinting your dinos, so you can also like care them and give imprinting and stuff, but it also gives them like a buff that basically when the Gigaraptor's near them, they get like an imprint buff that they normally wouldn't get, that gives them even more extra stats. After that, I have Fenrir. This thing would be pretty useful mid-game, because you could basically like cover it in ice spikes and give it resistance, as well as it can do decent damage and has a pack buff. But the thing is, in order to get this, you have to defeat Fenrir Sulfur, which you have to defeat like 6 other bosses in order to fight that boss. So this one's extremely late game, and by that time you don't need a creature like this at all. So it's really sad, but it's going to be in C tier. And then I have the Kentro, which is not very useful in PvE anyway. They do basically like recoil damage, so when you hit them, you get the damage back, but I can't ride them or anything, and I don't really have any uses for that, but it is a cool little gimmick that they have, but yeah. Next, I have the Basilisk. This one's going to go in the B tier. I don't really have much use for this one in PvE. It is a really cool creature, though, basically like a giant snake, but of course you have to use like rock drake eggs and stuff to tame it, so it's kind of annoying and out there to tame, so I'm just going to keep it in B tier, even though it is really strong. And then we have the Leoplorodon, which is going to go in the C tier. This one would be cool if it weren't like the rarest creature in the entire game, and when you tame it, you only get it for 30 minutes, and then it disappears, even though it basically like buffs loot crates and stuff. So when you get near loot crates, it buffs them, but most people say that the buff isn't really even really worth it. I think it's just okay, so it's going to be in C tier. And then we have the Phasolasuchus, the new creature on Scorched Earth, and this one's going to go in A tier. This one's pretty great. It's really strong. I've even seen people try bringing it into boss fights, but it's not really the main purpose of it. It could also get a ton of flint, which is what I like using it for, because you can basically get infinite amounts of flint if you swim in the sand, which is also pretty cool. Next is the Mosasaurus, which is going to be in the A tier. This one is a pretty great underwater creature. It's really strong and has a ton of health. One of the strongest underwater creatures. You can also put a textile on it as well. Only downside is it's not resistant to jellyfish and eels, which I find to be a very big downside, because those are all over the place and are really annoying. Then we have the Mesopithecus, which I'm going to put at B tier. It's one of the better shoulder pets, but I can't really put the shoulder pets extremely high, mainly because there's just a lot better creatures than shoulder pets. But I do like the ability. This one basically throws poop off your shoulder, so you can kind of use it to stun things that are attacking you. Then we have the Megaloceros, which is also going to go in the B tier. I like using this thing for gathering thatch, even though I feel like that's kind of an old school method, but I still use it quite a bit for that. I think that's what it's good for. Next is the Megalodon, which is also going to go in the A tier. This one's actually pretty decent, even though also I think this one needs a TLC as well, like a lot of these creatures, but this one definitely needs it. It is pretty good though, especially since it got its pack bonus and bleed attack. It can do bleed damage, and in packs they're actually really strong. Then we have the Astrodelphus, or the Space Dolphin. This one's going to be in the S tier. It's great for PvP, even though I don't play PvP, but it's also great for PvE as well. I think it's good in both of those modes because it is one of the fastest creatures in the entire game with the jet saddle, making it probably the best travel mount, or one of the best travel mounts in the entire game. Next I have the Moss Chops, which I want to put in the A tier. This one is just a great starter tame. It's super easy to tame because it's passive tame, and then once you get it, it can gather tons of fiber as well as berries and stuff in the early game, and you can even use it to get fiber in the late game. Then we have the Microraptor. This is going to be another one I put in the F tier. This thing is just extremely annoying in the wild, and I hate it. Then we have the Megalosaurus. This one's going to be in the B tier. This one is absolutely insane. It's like a killer, but it's only good at nighttime. It is actually really good on Aberration, but just because it's good on one map doesn't mean I'm going to put it high, because on all the other maps, it's not really the greatest. Then we have the gas bags, which I'm going to put at the A tier. These things actually have insane weight, so you can carry tons of stuff and haul a bunch of resources with it. But the flying is kind of useful, I guess, for moving those resources, so overall it's pretty good. Then there's the Shadow Mane, which is going to be the S tier. Probably the most overpowered creatures added in recent years. This one has insane abilities. Basically, you can like teleport, stun stuff. It does tons of damage. You can bring these things into boss fights. You can use them for travel. You can use them underwater as well. They're basically good all-around creatures, and they do everything amazingly. So easily they're S tier. They're one of the best creatures added. And then I have the Titans. All three of them are going to be in the A tier. I'm just going to clump them here. They are kind of hard to tame. Once you get them, you can use them for killing literally anything. It's pretty much, you're unstoppable with them. But you can also use them for the King Titan boss fight, which is another great use for them. Basically just using it as boss fighting creatures. Next is the Megachelon. This one's going to be in the B tier. It's a pretty cool creature. I really like the concept of it. You can build on the back of it, and it has like oxygen where you can breathe underwater, but it is kind of late game because it is extremely hard to tame and infuriating, and I don't find myself using it that much. Next is the Lystrosaur, which I'm also going to put in the B tier. This, you can basically pet it, and then it gives your like creatures around it XP. And for some reason, I had a dream about the Lystrosaur last night, and they were basically announced TLC 4, and the only creature that was getting a TLC update was the Lystrosaur. So I'm not really sure what that was about, but if the Lystrosaur gets announced at TLC, then something's up. But moving on from that, we have the Leech, which is also going to go in the F tier. Pretty sure you can tame this one with fish baskets, and I don't know why you'd want to, because they're kind of disgusting, and I don't like looking at them. But then we have the Stenomacrops, which is going to be the S tier. This one is one of the reasons why I rank all the other shoulder pets lower, because you'd have no other reason not to use the Stenomacrops. It literally is like a tech suit, basically. You can fly up and glide around with it at ease, and it's not even that hard to tame at all. You just passively tame it with Chitin. It's amazing, and it's extremely overpowered. Then there's the Snow Owl, which is also going to be in the S tier. One of the best flyers in the game, one of my favorites. It's kind of like an RG, except for you can like dive down and move extremely fast, as well as has the freeze ability, allowing you to heal stuff, so you can heal your wounded armies, as well as it actually has a thermal vision as well. Then we have the Coel. You can tame this one with fish baskets, and it literally is completely useless. I'm just going to put it in D tier though. I don't know, it's a fish, you can use it. I guess you can feed it to Shadow Manes, but feeding it to other creatures is kind of a very like sad use for this thing. And then we have the Rock Drake, which is going to be in the S tier. This one is basically essential and phenomenal in Aberration, but I think it's great on other maps too, because it can just go so fast. You can glide at insane speeds, climb any wall, and dive forwards, as well as it's pretty strong and has great stats overall, so you can use it for utility, and you can use it in the Rockwell boss fight as well. And then we have the Megatherium, which is going to be at the A tier. This one is a great creature overall. You get a buff when you kill things that have Chitin, and it basically makes it to where it has like 250% damage increase and like a 75% resistance or something like that. So you can basically not take any damage and deal a stupid amount of damage, which people use this for like the Broodmother boss fight or going in caves. Then we have the Megalania, which is going to be in the B tier. It's a very specific use case, but it can basically like climb walls, which is really cool, but I've never really found myself using it that much, especially because you have to go in caves to tame it, but on other maps you can find it in the open. Next I have the Giant Bat. Unlike the Desmodus, this one is kind of useless. You can passively tame it, and it's extremely aggressive, which makes it really annoying to tame, and for all of that, it pretty much does absolutely nothing, so it's just going to be in the D tier. Then we have the otter, which is going to be the A tier. One of the best shoulder pets, and that's why I'm putting it above all the other shoulder pets in A. Because first of all, it gives you insulation, so when you're in cold environments, you can survive in there way better, especially in some that you normally wouldn't be able to, as well as it can hold multiple artifacts in its inventory. Next up is the Oviraptor, which is going to be in the B tier. This one's a lot better in Arc Ascended because it can pick up fertilized and non-fertilized eggs whenever it's in the radius. It can also pick up wild eggs from wyverns and stuff, as well as if you put it on Wandering, it will increase the interval at which eggs drop. Then we have the Ovis, or the sheep. I'm going to put this one at B tier. This one's pretty much used as like a slaughterhouse, so you can slaughter all the sheep you get from breeding, and you can get mutton, because mutton is the best food in the game for carnivores. And then we had the Patchy Rhinoceros, which is going to be in the D tier. I mean, this one, I don't really have a use for it. I know it does like torpor with its headbutt, but I've never really used that. I don't think I've heard of anyone use that for actual use. Then we have the Parasaur, which is going to be in the A tier. One of the best starter tames. It's insanely easy to tame, and it has a few cool abilities, like being able to gather berries, as well as it can scare off small dinos like raptors and stuff. And it also has a little signal it can do, and it basically like alerts you of creatures that are nearby and will ping them. Next is the Parasaur, which I'm going to put at A tier. I actually like this one quite a bit. It's a really unique creature, but it also has a platform saddle where you can build like little mobile bases on it, as well as it can gather berries. And then we have the Patchy Rhinoceros, which is going to be in the D tier. This is one I never tame. I don't think I've tamed it in years. It has some pretty unique abilities, actually, like being able to like throw out these like spores that make things attack you, as well as like the opposite effect with the other variants, but I never really find myself using it. Next is the Wyvern. This is my favorite creature in the game and is easily S tier. I mean, it's amazing. It's a dragon, after all, that you can ride around. There's different elements of it which are extremely strong, and it's great for utility as well because it has tons of weight and stamina, so you can basically do everything you need with the Wyvern. After that, we have the Pegomastax, another F tier because it's just a horrible creature. It comes around and steals your stuff, and every time I've tamed one is by accident because it comes and steals berries from me and tames itself, so it's that desperate to be tamed. And then we have the Carcharodontosaurus. This one's going to be in the S tier. This one's absolutely amazing. Very similar to the Giga, except for it doesn't really do as much damage, but it can basically like warm up to basically more damage it does over time. It starts doing more as you attack, as well as it has the Blood Rage mode where when you kill stuff, you go insanely fast. And it has like a spin attack as well, so it's pretty cool. After that is the Pelagornis. I'm actually going to put this one at A tier. It has a very useful ability where you can basically harvest polymer with it, or organic polymer, and has a weight reduction on it. So I like using this thing for getting organic polymer. All the other uses aren't really that great. I mean, it can like land on water, which is cool, but mainly the organic polymer use is what I like it for. Next is the Pteranodon, which is also in A tier. This is a great starter tame. The first flyer you usually get, and it's really fast. It doesn't really have much stamina or weight, but it makes up for that in speed, as well as you can use it late game if you just want to get from point A to point B super quickly. Then we have the Perlovia, which I'm going to put at D tier. There's not really much uses for this thing. You could like put your items in it and then make it bury underground, but in PvE that's not really useful, so this one's completely useless in PvE. Also in the animated series, they were riding on this thing with a saddle, which I'm very jealous of. I don't understand why you can't ride the Perlovias in Ark, and they should definitely add that, especially after putting it in the animated series like that. Next we have the Quetzal, which I'm going to be putting at the A tier. This used to be like an S tier creature, but it's gone down with the additions of like the RG getting a TLC and being a lot better, and just a lot of other better flyers, making this one kind of redundant, which is really sad because it used to be like one of the best flyers. It does still have really great weight, and it has a platform saddle, which is really cool, and you can like build traps on the back of it and stuff, and you can use it to transport dinos and tame stuff like Titanosaurs. So I still think they're pretty good, which is why it's going to be in the A tier. After that, we have the Raptor, which I'm going to put in the B tier. It's a pretty decent overall beginner tame. You can get it pretty early on and super easily just by knocking it out, and it does some decent damage. It is pretty fast, but doesn't really have much weight or anything like that. The next creature is the Piranha. You can actually get this with fish baskets like all the other fish, but it doesn't really do much, I guess. I mean, it's just going to be in the D tier because overall, I mean, these underwater creatures pretty much do absolutely nothing, or at least fish, so you can get fish baskets. Then we have the Bloodstalker. This is an S tier creature for sure. It literally turns you into Spider-Man, and you can swing around, and it's got some pretty decent stats as well. This one's mainly useful on Genesis Part 1, but it's great on other maps too because you can swing around and pretty much get anywhere you need to at insane speeds by swinging. And then we have the Gotcha. So this one's also going to be an S tier. You can basically grind out resources. Now this is one that I actually haven't used as much as most people would have grinded with this thing, as you can basically get crystals off its back and they give you resources, as well as can actually give you rare items as well. After that, I have the Pumleoscorpius, or the Giant Scorpion. This one's going to be in the B tier. I think it's a pretty solid beginner tame overall, and it's really easy to tame. It also does torpor damage, which is a nice bonus, but it's not the best thing in the world, but it is pretty decent. And then after that, we have the Procoptodon, which is going to be in the A tier. This is a great beginner tame, especially on the maps like Scorched Earth and stuff. They are really great travel mounts and can jump extremely far. They also have that kick ability they can do, and they give like imprinting bonuses if you have a male and female and they're May boosted and you have one in the pouch, which is another just bonus ability. These things are great overall. Next we have the T-Rex, which is obviously going to go in S tier. How could I not put it in S tier? But it is a really great creature in the game as well. I mean, it's insanely strong. You can use it for bosses and probably one of the go-to creatures for bosses because it just works so well on pretty much all the bosses. And it's just great for like meat runs and stuff too if you need to get resources that way. It also has a tech saddle, which is cool. Next is the Sabertooth, which I'm actually going to put in the A tier. I like using this one for caves. It can get a lot of Chitin. It's one of the best creatures for harvesting Chitin, and it's pretty decent in those caves because you can put a saddle on it and get a bunch of armor with it. After that is the Sarco, which I'm going to put in the A tier. This one's a great one as well. It's pretty decent at killing stuff. It's not the best or go-to for that, but it's just a great travel mount, specifically underwater, because it moves at the speed of light for some reason and can swim extremely fast. So using this thing early game to basically go around the oceans at supersonic speed is great. Then we have the Manta, which I'm going to put at the C tier. Not really one I find myself using. I do like the ability where you can jump out of the water, which is pretty cool. It's just a decently fast one. But you need angler gel to tame it, which means I can't really get it early game, which is probably when I would use it the most because it's not the strongest thing, but it is decently fast and can jump out of the water. After that, we have the Spino, which is going to be the A tier. I wish I could put this one S tier, but unfortunately, it's not the best creature in the game, even though it is really high in the A tier in my opinion, because it is pretty decently strong, really strong actually, and it has a water buff where it gets like increased speed and damage when it's in the water. And I mean, it's pretty strong as well, but the health is lower than like Rex's and stuff, and overall the Rex ends up just beating it in a lot of places. And then we have the Terror Bird, which is in the C tier. This one's a decent tame, but it can run really fast, and it has the ability to like hover up, so you basically can't die from fall damage with it. But you can't die with fall damage on any creature because you can just jump off. But I think the ability to like flap and hover is kind of a unique ability. Next up is the Thylo, which I was originally going to put in A, but then I decided to put it in S because it is just a fantastic creature. It's like the best travel mount in the game. You can climb up walls, which is super awesome, and it does it really fast, and it's pretty easy to use. You just go straight up them. It also has a bleed attack, which you can use to kill stuff like Titanosaurs, because it even works on them, does like a 5% bleed, so it's insanely strong. You can use it in caves, has the bleed, and is great travel mount. Next is the Therizinosaur, which is also an S tier. This thing is a great all-around creature. First off, it's like the best harvesting creature in the game, as you can harvest like hide, wood, fiber, chitin, meat, berries, all that kind of stuff you need, as well as it's a great boss killer as well. People use this for the dragon boss fight and the overseer boss fight as well. You can use it in a lot of different bosses because it's really strong, so you can use it for bosses and harvesting, which is great. Then we have the Phiomia. This one is going to be in the C tier. This one has one use, and it's to make poop, which is a really sad use for a creature when its entire life's purpose is just to poop. But that's what this thing is used for, and it works very effectively, so it's going to be in the C tier. After that, we have the Crystal Wyverns, which is also going to be an S because it's another form of wyverns, which I do love. And of course, these ones are pretty great as well. They're smaller, but they have a few interesting abilities. Like the Tropical one, basically when it touches water, is insanely fast because it has the water buff as well as getting increased damage. Then you got the Blood one and the Ember one. The Crystal Wyverns are pretty great. Even though they are smaller, they do have some pretty cool abilities. Next is the Titanosaur, which I'm going to put at the B tier. In PvE, this one's not as useful as it would be in PvP, I imagine. It is really annoying to tame, but it does have a really big platform saddle that you can build on the back up, but you can only get it for 24 hours, but it is kind of fun to mess around with, and it is a really cool creature, so I'm just going to keep it in B. Next is the Troodon, which is going to go in the F tier. Same reason that all the other things are in F tier. I mean, I guess they're not bad creatures when you tame them, but wild, they're just so annoying that when I just see them, I just can't help but put them straight in the F tier. After that, we have the Tuso, or the giant squid. This one's also an A tier, one of the best underwater creatures. It is insanely strong, probably the strongest underwater creature. It's pretty decent speed, not the fastest thing in the world, but it can also pick up stuff underwater, and it has the ink ability as well, which is pretty unique. After that is the Trike, which is going to go in the A tier. This one is great early game for getting berries. You can even use it late game for berries if you really did want to. But this one is just a great berry harvester, as well as it can defend itself too. You can actually use it early game to kill off some stuff, as well as it has that charge ability, which you can use to take some pretty decent damage. Next is the Rhinognatha, the newest creature, one of the newer creatures in the game, and this one's in S tier. It's a great flyer. It has so much stuff it can do. First off, it's really fast. It's got like a 2 or 3-seater saddle, and then you can like basically land on walls, which is pretty cool. It can also swim underwater. A flyer that can actually swim underwater doesn't immediately dismount you when you get 5 like inches away from the water. Like it's great. It can also pick up stuff as well, and it can like shoot goop with sap. It's got a ton of abilities, and they're all pretty great. After that, I have the Titanoboa, which is going to be a D tier. I remember when they made this thing tameable, because originally Titanoboa eggs were like the rarest thing in the game, and with the old kibble system, you needed them really bad. But now, with the new kibble system, I say new, it came out in like 2018, but yeah, you don't really need Titanoboa eggs anymore, and these guys aren't rideable or anything, so they're pretty much useless. After that, we have the saber-toothed salmon, which I'm going to put at the D tier. Same as all the other fish, they don't really be used in the game, so they're just going to be a D tier. After that, we have the Terrajapa, which I'm going to put at the A tier. This one is a great flyer. It can move really fast, or decently fast anyway, and it can move in like 360 in all directions. It's got a 3-seater saddle, it can land on walls. The passengers can use guns, and it has a tech saddle, all of those making it really great and put worthy of the A tier. After that, we have the Stego, which is also going to be in the A tier. The TLC update upgraded it quite a bit, and it's more of a PvP dino, but it's still pretty good for PvE because the different plate modes allow it to harvest different things, which allows you to get berries, which is like the only creature in the game to have a weight reduction on berries, as well as you can harvest wood and thatch with it. Next creature I have is the Woolly Rhino, which I'm going to put at the B tier. I know a lot of people use this one for boss fights, but I usually play this game solo, so you can't really use the Woolly Rhino in boss fights, but it still does a lot of damage with its charge and is a pretty decent one overall, so it's just going to be in the B tier for now. And then we have the Strider, the Tech Strider. This one's in S tier. It's so overpowered with the harvesting plate. Basically, you can get an infinite amount of resources and any resource you want. And with the saddlebags, it gives it weight reductions as well as being able to instantly transfer all of that into a tech dedicated storage. This thing is absolutely crazy and extremely overpowered. I don't know why they did this. I mean, just look at all these resources I got within a few seconds of harvesting. It's crazy. After that, I have the Utyrannus, which is going to be at the A tier. I've thought about putting this one in the S, but it's kind of more specific use cases, so I'm going to keep it at A. Basically has a Courage Roar, which increases the damage and resistance of creatures, which makes it the perfect boss fighting creature. And it's also, you got the eggs for kibble as well. And then we have the Voidorem, which I'm also going to put at S tier. You could talk about putting this one lower, mainly because the breath isn't really that great for PvE, but it is a wyvern after all, and it's a tech one, and I still think all the other attributes of a wyvern make it worthy of being S tier, even if the breath isn't the greatest. Plus, I always wanted them to add a tech wyvern, so I can't really complain. But that is every single creature in Ark Survival Evolved and Ascended currently in the game ranked on a tier list. If you guys did enjoy and watch all 42 minutes of this, then make sure to like the video because it would be very appreciated. And also make sure to subscribe as well. But thanks for watching, and bye.